For life.
It's no secret or big revelation that the New World Order faction really helped WCW in becoming the #1 wrestling show in the United States during the mid to late 90s. The WWF and WCW were sharing Monday Night TV ratings victories throughout late 1995 and early 1996, but immediately after Kevin Nash was revealed as Scott Hall's surprise partner on June 10th, 1996, the fabled 83 weeks began and WCW began their dominating run over the WWF. WCW Nitro was just a better show at the time, and a lot of credit has to go to their insanely talented mid-card too. I truly believe that WCW had one of the best rosters of all time during this era. But it was also the nature of live television that gave WCW the edge over the World Wrestling Federation. There was a sense of unpredictability that came with live TV, and this sense of unpredictability really lent itself to the New World Order. The nWo became a huge part of World Championship Wrestling. The group became involved in most major storylines, and because WCW Nitro continued to beat WWF Raw in the ratings, Eric Bischoff felt that there wasn't much sense deviating from a winning formula. And with that, the New World Order and WCW became victims of their own success. Yes, the nWo were successful, the faction is legendary now, whether you want to admit it or not, but there were quite a few problems with the group and the overall storyline, some painfully obvious problems, and some that were a bit more nuanced, yet they were still issues that the group never bounced back from. Today's video will look at 6 problems with the New World Order. The first problem is an obvious one, and it's the one most people think about when they talk about the New World Order: too many members. The New World Order began as a trio: Kevin Nash, Scott Hall and Hulk Hogan, but this trio would only last for around 2 months. September of 1996 saw Ted DiBiase, The Giant, Bogus Sting, Sean Waltman and Vincent join the group. And it can be argued that when Vincent walked out as a member of the New World Order, the faction had already begun getting watered down. By the end of the year, Eric Bischoff, Buff Bagwell, Masahiro Chono, VK Wall Street, Big Bubba and Scott Norton had also joined the group. So what's that, 14 people already in the space of 6 months? 15 if we include Miss Elizabeth? More would get added as time went on, and it only served to further water down the initial concept. There were some good wrestlers who would join the group, such as Kurt Hennig and Randy Savage, but there were also some questionable additions too, and this expansion of the New World Order created more problems that we'll talk about very soon. A lot of people argue that the New World Order should have stayed as a trio, and I don't necessarily agree with that. Adding a few new members here and there to keep things fresh is absolutely fine in my book, but when you're throwing 10 guys in there, yeah, I do agree that it's going to reduce the impact of the faction. It almost became a running joke. The mystery third man stuff at Bash at the Beach 96 was great. The mystery fourth man at Fall Brawl 96 was kind of intriguing. And after that, it just felt like the group were picking their friends to ride this big money train. There was a method to this madness though, and that brings us on to problem number 2, the failed TV show. The nWo grew in numbers at a seriously alarming rate because Eric Bischoff envisioned the faction having its very own TV show and pay-per-view events. An nWo TV show wouldn't work with just 3 guys fighting on one side. I mean, imagine the 4 Horsemen or Evolution having their own TV show. Well, WWF Raw became Evolution's TV show for a while, but still. More nWo members could give the nWo TV show a bit more structure with lower, mid-card and upper-card players spaced throughout the entire broadcast. And that's one of the reasons why we got a lot of questionable additions to the faction. The group had their own pay-per-view first of all to sort of test the waters. nWo sold out in January of 1997, and while Eric Bischoff done a fantastic job of giving the pay-per-view its own identity, it turned out that fans simply didn't want to see it. Sold Out 1997 only brought in around 170,000 pay-per-view buys, which to be fair is great by today's standards, but when you look at the pay-per-views before and after Sold Out, you can see that fans weren't very eager to buy into this New World Order show. The event did include a very well received matchup, Sean Waltman vs Eddie Guerrero, but everything else about nWo Sold Out was very unremarkable. Towards the end of 1997, Bischoff decided to again test the waters by dedicating the whole second half of WCW Nitro to the New World Order. Eric once envisioned WCW Nitro becoming an nWo exclusive show called nWo Nitro, while Thunder on Thursday nights would become a WCW exclusive show, not so different from the Raw and SmackDown brand splits that we would see in the future. But again, fans didn't enjoy it. The execution of the show wasn't great either, with a ton of airtime being wasted, with the set being redesigned for the New World Order, causing people to switch over to WWF Raw instead of watching an arena get redecorated. I said this before though, you gotta give Eric Bischoff credit for thinking outside the box and seeing the opportunity to capitalise on something that was insanely popular, but fans just weren't ready for it, and the numbers and feedback proved that. Still, it would be good to see other wrestling companies take risks like this. It might not always work, but it's still interesting to learn about. Problem number 3 centres around the New World Order's dominance in the main event scene, something that many former WCW superstars have talked about since the closure of the company. With Hulk Hogan's creative control in place and with the money Eric Bischoff had spent to bring in guys like Hall and Nash, there was going to be a real struggle for guys to break into the main event picture. That's not to say it didn't happen. For example, DDP and Goldberg were able to climb up the ranks, and their main event pay-per-view match had absolutely nothing to do with the New World Order, but Goldberg and Page really were the two standout exceptions. There was also a huge roster of seriously talented superstars who would never be able to main event a pay-per-view because the nWo were usually in the final spots on the card wrestling what many consider to be old-timers. Young guys simply couldn't catch a break in WCW, and when the company did finally begin putting more faith into their mid-card, it was too little too late. The nWo had pretty much dissolved by this time, and many of these mid-card guys were fed up, already looking for other places to work. The younger guys of WCW were vocal about their place on the card, and they were also vocal about how certain nWo guys were phoning in their performances. For example, while talking about his Inner Circle faction, Chris Jericho recently said in a Sports Illustrated interview, "Any comparisons between Jericho and Hulk Hogan in the nWo begin and end with knowing how to get heel heat. In the ring, it's a different story." That was one of the things that was great and not so great about WCW. The nWo was so huge and made so much money, but whenever it came down to the actual matches in the ring, they were never that great. Guys like Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio also spoke out about the nWo's dominance in the main events. Guerrero said that the Cruiserweights were the real backbone of WCW who carried the company with good matches, and he said the nWo being on top constantly got boring. Everyone just got tired of seeing the group at the end of Nitros and at the end of pay-per-views. Chris Benoit was very vocal too about the booking of WCW. And every one of these aforementioned WCW superstars, Jericho, Eddie, Mysterio and Benoit, they would all become world champions in the WWE. I will say this though, to be fair, the marquee value of the New World Order and the incredible Cruiserweight division was really what gave WCW much of its appeal. In comparison to what the WWF were doing, WCW Nitro just felt like a much more exciting show, and much of that was thanks to both the New World Order and WCW's brilliant mid-card performers. It was a package. But still, that doesn't stop those same perceived mid-card guys wanting to climb up the ladder. If they were putting on all these exciting matches and effectively carrying the company from an in-ring perspective, then they should also have a chance to earn good money with main event matches. WCW were absolutely killing it in regards to their TV ratings and pay-per-view numbers. It can be argued that if the New World Order was working so well in the main event picture, and if fans were tuning into TNT in record numbers, then why would Eric change the formula? And it's a simple answer really. WCW absolutely needed to think about their future beyond the nWo, and WCW would need to think about who would carry those main events forward once the faction had disappeared. And if you take a quick look at the main event scene during WCW's final year or so, it's pretty evident that building future stars was not a WCW priority. Problem number 4, too many nWo groups. The original Wolfpack group of Scott Hall, Kevin Nash and Six I thought was a great idea. The 3 original Clique members formed a small group within the faction, but they still represented the greater nWo. The 3 men would, on occasion, use the Freebird rule while defending the WCW tag titles. And honestly, I liked the idea of the original Wolfpack. It worked really well and it suited these 3 guys. Over time though, the nWo would begin fighting among themselves and a breakaway group was formed, the popular nWo Red and Black Wolfpack, that had a serious shift in identity when compared to the original nWo Black and White. Now, the Wolfpack was popular and still to this day fans have good memories of the group. We can't call the Wolfpack in itself a problem, but we can look at what the Wolfpack left behind and see a major problem. The Black and White nWo instantly became second rate thanks to the formation of the Wolfpack. There were still some big names left in the original nWo for sure, but the Black and White nWo felt second rate in comparison to the Red and Black. And because nWo Hollywood would continue to argue among themselves, it just got really old really fast. The infamous merger of the Wolfpack and the Black and White to form nWo Elite was also met with criticism thanks to how it was pulled off. And to show how much the undercard Black and White nWo guys meant to WCW, they were labelled the B Team and they were mainly seen on WCW Thunder. All in all, there was a ridiculous amount of nWo factions. There was the original nWo, nWo Wolfpack, nWo Hollywood, nWo Elite, nWo B Team, nWo Japan, nWo 2000. There was also the Latino World Order too, but they didn't really have anything to do with the original core group. So yeah, it got messy. Too many chefs in the kitchen, too many nWo guys and too many groups led to a serious amount of confusion, especially if you skipped a few episodes of Nitro. Problem number 5, no endgame. Every story has a start, a middle and an end, but not the story of the nWo. The faction had an amazing start, they had a middle, and another middle, and another middle. It kept going on, and there simply wasn't a finish line for the story arc. Again, it comes down to WCW not wanting to change their winning formula, and when something is so white hot, you can't really blame them either. But I'm sure if you go back and ask the booking committee if they would have done things differently, they absolutely would. Typically in wrestling, the babyface overcomes the heel after a long chase, and to their credit, WCW done a fantastic job when Sting became the main man who chased after the nWo. For over a year, WCW built a story where one day Sting would get a chance to face Hollywood Hogan in the ultimate battle of WCW versus nWo. The build was made even better because Sting wouldn't wrestle during this entire build-up. Not only did people want Hogan and the New World Order to get their comeuppance, but fans were desperately wanting to see the Stinger back inside the ring. The match happened at Starrcade 1997, and many feel that Starrcade should have been the final chapter of the New World Order. Sting would emerge victorious to close the pay-per-view, and because Eric Bischoff lost the opportunity to take over WCW Nitro earlier in the show, this really could have been the night where the New World Order completely fell apart. We all know what happened. The inconclusive finish to Starrcade and the Nitro that followed the show made it crystal clear the New World Order were not going anywhere. Again, to balance out this argument, if the nWo did end right here, then there would be no nWo Wolfpack, and people do have fond memories of that group. But only a few months after Starrcade, and only a few months after fans realised that the formula was not going to change, WWF Raw's War began beating Nitro in the TV ratings. Starrcade 1997 is only one example of how the New World Order could have ended, though. I'm not entirely sure that ending the story arc right here would be the right call, but looking back with 2020 hindsight, it probably would have been a smart decision. There were practically limitless ways to end the group through a storyline perspective, but it just never happened. The New World Order would form splinter groups, they would reunite, guys would get injured or contracts would expire. And rather than write a definitive ending to the story, the group would kinda just fizzle out after a few weeks. The same thing happened with nWo 2000. Nonsensical fighting, injuries, and no forward thinking led to the group just sort of slowly breaking away. You've got a month filled with nWo promos, and by the end of the following month, it's like the group never existed. I think too that the World Wrestling Federation recognised this when the nWo was brought back in 2002. Either that or it's a big coincidence. But Vince McMahon came out and he actually announced that the New World Order was done and we'd never hear their famous theme music ever again. It's a small thing, but in the entire history of the New World Order, this was the only time that any kind of announcement was made in regards to the group and storyline finishing.
You heard the nWo music for the very last time.
The nWo, however, isn't the only group or storyline within wrestling that has came to an end without a proper finish being written, and it's not like someone comes out to announce the end of every storyline. That would be silly. We could make multiple videos about things that didn't end within wrestling, but what makes this problem stand out for the New World Order was the amount of times the faction was brought back, only to fizzle out once again. And that leads us on to the sixth and final problem with the New World Order, the WWF version in 2002. Even with all these problems the nWo had in WCW, and even though their reputation preceded them, the return of the New World Order in 2002 was something that got me really excited. And seeing Kevin Nash, Scott Hall and Hulk Hogan himself return to the WWF after all this time opened up a serious amount of creative avenues that Vince McMahon could take in 2002. Not only was McMahon bringing back three prominent former WWF superstars, one of which was an absolute megastar of professional wrestling, but Vince was also bringing in this renegade group who were labelled as company killers, three men who set out to ruin WCW in storyline, and in a much more real manner, three WWF guys who turned their backs on the World Wrestling Federation and successfully competed against the company. The reintroduction of the nWo went well, in my opinion. They showed up at the No Way Out pay-per-view in 2002, where they pretended to be good guys, they shot down any nonsense about the group being company killers, and their promo ended with the three men thanking Vince McMahon for the opportunity. By the end of the night though, it was made clear that the superstars of the WWF weren't very happy to have Hall, Nash and Hogan in their locker room. And No Way Out ended with the nWo costing Stone Cold Steve Austin the WWF title. The New World Order would immediately feud with the WWF's two top superstars, Steve Austin and The Rock, so in terms of making an impact, it was going well. Hogan vs Rock and Hall vs Austin took place at WrestleMania 18, and by the end of WrestleMania, the nWo were already falling apart at the seams. Hollywood Hogan lost his match against The Rock, but the bigger story here was that Hogan was getting prepped up for a babyface run. Scott Hall took a loss to Steve Austin, and the next night on Raw, it was made clear that Hogan was no longer going to be associated with the faction. The nWo would remain in WWF and new members were quickly added. Sean Waltman returned to join the group, former member The Big Show would put on an nWo shirt once again, Booker T joined the New World Order, and I always thought this was a strange choice. And finally, the very last person to ever join the nWo was Shawn Michaels. With Scott Hall gone, the final incarnation of the New World Order featured Kevin Nash, X-Pac, The Big Show, and leader/spokesman Shawn Michaels. And just as the New World Order tried to recruit Triple H, Kevin Nash got injured and the storyline ended. The aforementioned Vince McMahon announcement took place, and the nWo as an active faction and an active storyline was completely over. The group would make odd appearances on special episodes of Raw and whatnot, but the WWE version of the New World Order simply failed to get properly off the ground. It started well. From No Way Out right up until WrestleMania, it looked like the group were going to cause some serious damage in the WWF, but once Hulk Hogan left, it just wasn't the same. I think you guys who subscribe to this channel know I'm a big nWo fan. I've got a serious amount of nostalgia for the group, and I love reliving the days when the faction were the hottest thing in professional wrestling. But even I can admit that the overall handling of the group wasn't great, and the week-to-week uncertainty surrounding the storyline was truly abysmal sometimes. That being said, even with these 6 problems that I've pointed out, I still really enjoy going back and watching the New World Order because I just really enjoy that era of wrestling. I know a lot of old school JCP and WCW fans despise the New World Order, but not me. I thought the faction was awesome. But I've no problems also pointing out the things that weren't so great about the group. With this in mind, what other subjects would you like to see covered in this series? What other groups, wrestlers, storylines, events, important moments and eras do you think would make interesting, problematic videos? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and take care. Wrestling bios, reliving the war, and every video that you see on this channel, they're all made possible thanks to my supporters on Patreon. I'm being serious too. If these guys didn't support me, then I probably would have gave up on the channel a long time ago, or at least uploaded at a much slower rate. So thanks to everyone on Patreon for helping me out and making Wrestling Bios as successful as it is. 2 supporters who signed up as Hall of Famers are Vincent and Rylan, so a special shout out to both of these guys for joining up at the Hall of Fame tier. We've got some watch-alongs uploaded over on Patreon, there's the opportunity to see Wrestling Bios videos before anyone else, and there's a ton of other content there, including the full versions of the remixes you hear on this YouTube channel. So if any of this is of interest, or if you just want to help me out, then search for Wrestling Bios on Patreon and have a look at the page. Again, a huge thank you to everyone who supports.